Welcome back to the class, everyone. Galactic Republic has been the talk of the town for the last couple months, with new additions like Kelleron Beck and even now Queen Amidala. It's about time that we took a look and we ranked them all out, say which teams they should go in, and then even suggest a possible farming order. So we've done these videos before, but basically the whole intent here is to give an overview of the faction, as we previously said, saying which teams most of the characters are usually best fit in, ranking them as individuals, and then finally suggesting what order you might want to farm them in if you have a quote-unquote normal roster. Galactic Republic, luckily enough, at least for me, is actually one of the easiest factions to sort out into various teams. We had quite the struggle when we were looking at the Rebel faction because there is a lot of overlapping with the Rebel fighters. Galactic Republic, it doesn't have such weaknesses. The JMK team is pretty uniform and you wouldn't typically swap most of the characters out, and if you were to, you typically swap them out already with another team that would give you the character in return. What I mean by that is sometimes you don't use General Kenobi, you would use Mace, but then the bright side to that is you just put General Kenobi in whatever team that Mace was in before, making it pretty clean cut. I will say that Padme here is more of a filler than anything. The reality is the fifth character on JMK doesn't matter all that much. I prefer Padme because she makes JML just a little bit harder as far as overall win rates go. But for the most part, this is just the generic JMK team that you're going to see a lot on offense and defense, and quite frankly is very good. Next up is going to be the General Skywalker team. There's really no room for words in edgewise for this team, just because there's only 6 characters in total, and if we want to get all the full clone bonuses from 5's tactical awareness, we don't necessarily want to be running Ahsoka in the team. While she can work, it's probably not ideal for how things are getting split up, especially considering Ahsoka works in so many other factions better. Next up is going to be the Jedi Council-ish team. Depending on what game mode you are in, you're going to want Qui-Gon Jinn or Kelleron Beck to lead it. Pretty much Qui-Gon Jinn for Grand Arena, and Kelleron Beck for every other game mode. While Kelleron Beck does seem to be mostly outfitted for Territory Wars, in reality, when you look at his base leadership without the Omicron, it's just better than Qui-Gon's in every single way, assuming you do not have Qui-Gon Jinn's GAC Omicron active or whatever game mode it is. Now, if you are going to do that, you're going to want to remove Qui-Gon Jinn entirely from the team. One of the things that I've seen just a little bit that we want to avoid is we do not want to be running Kelleron Beck lead with Qui-Gon Jinn. Qui-Gon Jinn, quite frankly, outside of his Omicron, it's really bad. It doesn't do a whole lot, doesn't do much. Like, you would be better off putting in a generic healer like Luminar in there, or maybe Ayla or Barriss that we're going to look at, who are going to be in other teams right now, but for the most part, that's where that stands. Next up is going to be the Bad Batch team. Again, this is very similar to the 501st. There isn't really a lot of debate here as to who is the best fifth. The only one that we're going to consider today is Shaak Ti, because Shaak Ti does give a lot of really good clone bonuses, but if you're looking to use a non-GR character, which this has always been kind of funny to me, but I guess it makes sense, Omega is not Galactic Republic. She only got the Clone Trooper and Bad Batch tags, as you can see up top, so she didn't really make sense to be put in the squad builder, but obviously it should go without mentioning, or shouldn't go without mentioning, that she probably is the ideal fifth for this team. But Shaak Ti can also be used there if you're not wanting to work up a character who isn't actually required for anything different from the rest of the Bad Batch who are required for Lord Vader. Now, teams that don't necessarily go into Galactic Republic comps commonly are going to be these 5. While there is a little bit of wiggle room here, C-3PO is almost always used on a CLS team. Most people wouldn't debate that. Chewbacca himself, if he's being used on any team, it's probably going to be a Wookiee team. R2 obviously has Leia and a multitude of other teams he can be used under. Plo Koon often gets used either with Starkiller or with Bastila because he gets to taunt with both of those teams despite the fact that he doesn't have a taunting ability. And then Grandmaster Yoda, again, not bad with Galactic Republic. I just feel like 9 times out of 10 that people use him, he's being used under a normal Jedi lead like Jedi Master Luke, Jedi Knight Luke, or even a Jedi Knight Revan. So overall, we're not really too concerned with where they go. And last but not least is going to be the Queen Amidala team. And this is going to be really awkward because by the time I'm filming this, I don't have Queen Amidala 7 stars, but by the time this video comes out, there will already be a little bit of testing out there. We're just going to say this is the generic best or ideal split for Galactic Republic right now, purely because even by the time this comes out, we're going to only have a few hours worth of testing, and none of that testing will be able to see what her GAC Omicrons do, so we don't really know the full potential of the team. But this is the comp we're going to be recommending. If you're wondering why these two specifically, we go really in depth as to which ones can be good with Queen Amidala in the Queen Amidala video that released today or yesterday at the time that this is being viewed. While I do believe there are other characters that can work maybe here better, like Ki-Adi-Mundi is going to be better used typically on a Qui-Gon Jinn or a Kelleran Beq team. So definitely some wiggle room here at the bottom. This is just kind of what seems like the best deal. Barriss has a lot of being crit synergy, and then Ayla is just nice utility and support to be able to consistently stun the enemy team. Now, I do want to throw out an honorable mention for a team split to Gidme. This is the Padme comp that uses Galactic Republics that are also support, like Eth Koth, like Coruscant Underworld Police, like Shakti, or Ayla also would fit into this. R2 would also fit into this. And then you'd use Gideon. And the whole reason why we do this, and you've probably heard me talk about this a ton if you've been on the channel for any amount of time, is that support allies gain 100% protection up. When you do that, you reduce the entire enemy's turn meter to 0, and because Padme can't lose turn meter, or rather her entire team can't lose turn meter, you end up getting to go first, and you're all loaded up with 100% protection up, which turns into 20 stacks of courage, and then you just get to watch your Cup and your Eth Koth annihilate the enemy Traya Savage squad, which is a very popular counter to use this against. But obviously, you're probably going to use Padme most of the time with JMK, but if you aren't, this is a really fun option if you're going to put in another filler for this team. So those are the team splits. Now let's get on to the ranking. This one was pretty fun to do, and I felt like we actually got it down very well. So tier 1 are going to be these 3 characters, and I realize this probably looks really weird when you first think about it. You're like, there's no way. I realize that General Skywalker is good, but there's no way General Skywalker is as good as Cat and JMK. And while that phrase itself is true, Gas is not as good as JMK and Cat. He is good as Cat, or he is good as JMK. Together, these 2 characters make one of the best teams in the entire game, but separately, they're somewhat comparable to what General Skywalker is able to do. If we take JMK out of the equation, Commander Ahsoka Tano is being put on a lot of other teams and being used to great effect, but she's performing very similar to how General Skywalker would, where they both have outside shots against certain galactic legends. And even the opposite is mostly true. If we take out Cat away from JMK, General Skywalker is actually a counter that beats all JMK squads that do not have Cat to immediately leap and kill him right off the bat. So these 3 characters are going to be able to share the top spot just because they are that good. They're either Galactic Legendists or challenging Galactic Legends, depending on the combos that they are put with, and overall just great characters. Next up is going to be tier 2. These are just the really important ones that make or break most of the squads that they're in. Obviously, Padme gives a lot of viability to other squads, but also has her own leadership that was important for a very long time. Kelleran Beq is what makes the Jedi Council S team actually good outside of the one game mode that Qui-Gon Jinn is offering them. Mace is just amazing. I've talked in great lengths about Mace. He is a fantastic tank, and on top of that, Shatterpoint is just ridiculously good. His TW Omicron is also very fun, and Jedi Anakin is really, again, what makes the Qui-Gon Jinn team. You don't really have the Qui-Gon Jinn team if you don't have to worry about Jedi Anakin completely blowing up on you. Ship is also very important for what the Negotiator wants to do. Speaking of the Negotiator, GK, also amazing tank, has the Negotiator. Not really a lot of room for debate why he wouldn't be put in an A tier or whatever, however we will label this. Yeah, tier 2 level character. Very good. Obviously not as good as Cat, General Skywalker, and JMK, but all amazing characters. Tier 3, we're still going to see important characters, but maybe not as crucial to their squads as we saw before. We've got Qui-Gon Jinn himself again for the GAC Omicron use that we previously mentioned. It is a one game mode hero, but it is still very important for most accounts, especially in the beginning game. Ki-Adi-Mundi, not, again, the most important first or second character on teams, but because of his unique, he's going to add a lot of viability to not only Jedi and GR teams, but also to Jedi teams elsewhere where there aren't necessarily GR. We actually talked about that a little bit with the Amidala comp, because he's able to pass the second part of his kit even without the entire team being Galactic Republic Jedi. Echo is the only real Bad Batch who has any amount of plug and play with never any doubt. This is dispel all buffs on all enemies and inflict daze and healing immunity for 2 turns, and these can't be resisted. Like, this is really, really good. And you can just plug it into a JMK comp or really into any comp to be able to utilize a buff dispel and then daze and healing immunity on top of that. It's very hard to get around. Ahsoka Tano, again, we've talked about her. Pretty important, that 3rd or 4th character that you want to have on a team. You're going to get her for free pretty much at the beginning of the game anyways, but that's just kind of where she stands overall. Grandmaster Yoda, very similar to Cam, just makes a lot of those other squads end up being better. Now, the way we have this, the rest of the split is kind of self-explanatory, but it doesn't make sense to judge the 501st characters separately because they're all pretty much doing the same amount of work on the 501st team, whether you have them led by Shaak Ti or General Skywalker. There's a little bit of nuance, like saying, you know, 5 sacrifice is more important, but at the same time, if 5 isn't sacrificing himself for the other clones, then it really didn't have much value to begin with. So there is a hierarchy between them, but overall, from a ranking perspective, they all need to be used together to have value. The same exact thing can be said about Bad Batch. We're not going to really go into detail about that. These guys are really nice to add on to your roster. Shaak Ti is a little bit difficult. Maybe she shouldn't be ranked this low. This is probably a very end game opinion. Shaak Ti has a lot of overall plug and play viability. Her basic ability really doesn't care who is on the team. They don't have to be clone or Jedi or even Galactic Republic. She will just give all of them offense up. She's got a nice cleanse as well. She can be plugged and played and used again in a lot of GR or different GR squads. But ultimately, if she were to disappear entirely from my roster right now, it would not be the end of the world. I realize that is very different from a lot of the people who are using her in a much more leveraged way as the only leader for their 501st or even their only 5th for a Bad Batch, but overall, that's kind of where she stands as a just general good plug-and-play character that in theory could wait, but in reality, actually, this isn't really the farming order. You can't wait on her because you have to have her before you have General Skywalker. Next up is going to be Plo Koon. I actually really like Plo Koon. He does have the tank tag, which is very nice because that means under a Bastila or a Starkiller lead, he will be able to taunt. We mentioned that earlier in the video. His ship is also one of the most important ships for the Galactic Republic faction right now. It's one of the only things alongside Marauder that is actually letting them counter some of those end game fleets, so overall very good. His basic also dispels, so that's pretty cool. Barriss, overall plug and play healer, really nice to have. That's kind of where all these characters sits. They're not necessarily the most important character for your entire roster, but they're all really nice to have and can get you out of some tight situations, or at the very least help fill up your other team that is already doing a few other things. Now up next is going to be tier 5, and this is where this isn't like the bad tier, but this is also not the good tier. All these characters that are sitting here, they have like 1 or 2 uses that help them out a little bit. They're not transcendent by any means. They're probably not even described as filler, but they're not terrible to have. Like, you can throw them on a squad and it'll be, and like I probably wouldn't mod shame you or anything like that if I were your opponent. Luminara has her Omicron ability, which actually is still the best part of her kit, despite the fact that it really struggles in a lot of situations because it doesn't allow it to be used with protection up, which most of the squads that you would want to put her on are going to have that. Ayla has some really nice stuns from her unique ability where she can consistently do that, and then her basic can also call in someone to assist, which is pretty nice. Eth Koth, our good friends Amagunda, and Coruscant Underworld Police all have the support and Galactic Republic tags, which means you can use them under Gidme. And the really nice thing about using those characters specifically under Gidme is then you don't have to use your R2 or your Grandmaster Yoda or your Shaak Ti that you wanted in a better place under Gidme. You can throw, that's the whole reason why my Eth Koth is Relic 3 is because I know I will never have to use him anywhere else, and he can just be a completely free agent for that team. Now, this is the garbage tier. I have nothing nice to say. I get it if you're at a certain point in your roster where you don't have anything better to use, so you throw Cody or Clone Sergeant with Shaak Ti, or you put Jedi Knight Guardian with something, like Qui-Gon Jinn, I guess. That's fine, but they're not good. These are the characters that you want to replace absolutely first on a team once you can. Kit Fisto is R5 because of the current data chrono right now, not because he's necessarily good. In fact, his kid is one of the saddest things in game right now, if I'm being totally honest. If we were to get one more rework to a character, I would really want it to be Kit Fisto. Like, he just does absolutely nothing. He has nothing going for him whatsoever. I mean, this unique just makes me want to cry. But at any rate, yeah, don't really bother with these characters. Kit Fisto does have a mission in the territory battles right now, but you're much better off building up a character who actually matters and just getting there via deployed GP instead of having to do that mission. Next up are going to be the outsourced ones. The reason why we're not ranking them with Galactic Republic is just because you typically would use them elsewhere, so why would we rank them? Queen Amidala at the bottom right now because, again, at the timing of this video, she is not currently unlockable or at 7 stars, so it doesn't really make sense to rank her overall viability when we have no idea what it looks like. Even at the time that this comes out, we'll have very limited testing to even go off of. And next up, we are going to look at the farming order. So we've looked at how we want to split the teams once we have all the characters, how they rank individually stacking up, but how do you practically farm them up because you can't just start with the best ones. You can't start by farming JMK as your first Galactic Republic. So we have this ordered out for you. Now, these first set of characters are essentially what I will call free. Jedi Anakin as well as Ahsoka Tano are on very easy nodes to get them, primarily shops for Ahsoka Tano Fulcrum, or not Ahsoka Tano Fulcrum, but Ahsoka Tano, and you also get them as brand new characters when you are first starting the game. Mace is wildly accessible, being available in 2 stores. You can farm him up super quickly, and he's very good to have on a multitude of squads, not just the ones we have listed below. Grandmaster Yoda, obviously once you get 5 Jedi, he's a complete freebie. So once you have these previous 3 plus say Kanan and Ezra, then you already have Grandmaster Yoda. And then JK, you just kind of get free via raid currency very early on in the game. You can focus in on other teams, and then you'll have him without really much intention at all behind it. So from a farming perspective, it makes sense to get these 5 first, not only because they're good characters, and we've gone into length about that, but because they're just wildly accessible, and you really don't have to go over any hurdles to be able to get them. For the second round of characters that we're going to want to farm, assuming we aren't farming anything in between, or even if we are, we're going to have Padme Amidala, and this just makes sense because you don't have a Galactic Republic team without a Galactic Republic leader, and because again we can't go right after JMK or Amidala, Padme by far makes the most sense. It's also pretty normal for newer players to go after Geonosians that can immediately unlock her, so it just becomes this really nice, soothing farming plan that you can go after in the very beginning to get her, and then you can start to just throw all the characters that you already have farmed, like Jedi Anakin, like Ahsoka Tano, like Mace Windu, like General Kenobi, in on that team if you so choose. Shaak Ti is here as well, just because if we're going to want to go into the clones, and I do think we really, from a farming perspective, the clones make a lot of sense to go after immediately right after that, just because, again, very similar to the characters we've seen before, you don't have to wait 3 or 6 months farming them up through a hard node. You can just get them through the stores a lot quicker than you would be able to, again, getting them off of a hard node, and they're all actually available via stores, which is very, very nice. So getting all of them together, it also makes sense to get Shaak Ti from a farming perspective, because we can't get General Skywalker this early in the game, and again, she has plug and play viability even after they are gone, so it makes sense to go after this batch of characters next. Now for wave 3, now that we already have all of our clones built up, we have Shaak Ti, we have Padme, we would want to get 3PO. I realize we've called him outsourced twice, and the reason why we're not calling him outsourced for the perspective of the farming is because he is required for General Skywalker, so you have to plan on farming him. You can't just say, oh, I'll do that at another point when I work on Ewoks. No, you have to get him for General Skywalker. Now, at this point, we'll be able to shift over and put the clones with him. Arc is a hard node farm, so it does take a little bit longer to get him than, say, through the shipments, but by the time you will have worked up to get up General Skywalker, it should not be hard to add him to the team. Once we're done with the 501st, at this point we have 501st and Padme, we'll start finishing off the Jedi Council team between Qui-Gon Jinn and Kelleran Beck to be able to get the best of both modes. The reason why Qui-Gon Jinn didn't fall earlier on this, despite the fact that he is very easy to farm, is because it doesn't make sense to recommend a character whose really only viability is his Omicron, when in the beginning of the game, you don't have any Omicrons to give. Even if he's your first, like, you could probably farm all 5 of these characters first, granted not to like relics or anything crazy, but you could have them up and you wouldn't already be able to transition to Padme as a leader, because Omicrons are really scarce in the beginning of the game, and depending on what you're trying to do, you might already want to put one on Savage, and that might not be the best move for you. Kelleran Beck actually is accessible to early game. He is not currently accelerated, but his node is fairly low, so it's pretty cheap. You can work on if you're wanting to use your Qui-Gon Jinn squad outside of Grand Arena. Now, from a farming perspective, it makes sense to go after JMK next, because we have most of the pieces built there. Obviously, the Ayla, Cody, and Sergeant are also required for him, so you have to get those before getting him. Then once you have him, you can also go after Commander Ahsoka Tano. Now, you might want to start farming her a little bit before this. While she is kind of farmable right now, she's available in a variety of stores. She's in the legend tokens. I believe she does appear for Get 3 as well, and I think even some Conquest Proving Ground stuff. So there are ways to plan to farm her. I realize she is terrible to farm, as almost all of the Conquest characters become after they leave Conquest. But that being said, by the time we've actually gotten to the wave 4 of farming, hopefully you can have planned accordingly so that when you unlock JMK, you can have her right by a site and get the full benefit of that team. Now, from a farming perspective, Bad Batch got pushed way off to the very end purely because they're very Kyrotech heavy. I would rather you have General Skywalker, Padme, Qui-Gon Jinn, and JMK built up, just because, awkwardly enough, they're not as Kyrotech heavy as a team as Bad Batch are, just because they all 4 of them require it before getting all the way up to Gear 12. We put Plo Koon in this wave as well, purely because most of Plo Koon's viability, not all, but most of Plo Koon's viability in the endgame is he has to be Relic 8 to be able to get in front of Executor, right? Or even Relic 7. Now, if you want to have Plo Koon at like Gear 8 or Gear 10 or Gear 11 as a reinforcement, that's fine. He's fantastic. But if we're talking about farming him all the way up, we're going to want to do that later. I realize he's actually a really easy character to come by given the node that he's on and the cheap gear that he has. Go ahead and feel similar to Qui-Gon Jinn. If you want to unlock him and get him to Gear 8 in the very beginning, that's fine. But taking him to his fullest point, we should probably be waiting till later on after we have bigger things squared away. Now, Wave 6 is going to be a very lonely Ki-Adi-Mundi, and the reason for this, and anyone who's watching this knows, he's just terrible to get. I love the character, a lot of great things in his kit, overall pretty fantastic, but he is just expensive. No guild is currently staying long enough in Geonosis territory battle to actually unlock him at 7 stars, so you're forced to spend your get 3 currency on him, and that would be fine, but most of the people out there are stuck or have like 5 or 6 of their farms stuck on Kyrotech, which get 3 also buy, so you end up with this really difficult decision. And I do believe there comes a time and point where you do want to sacrifice the Kyrotech to farm him up. It's just gonna be it's gonna be after you've done everything else for the Galactic Republic faction. Like, I'd rather you have Bad Batch than Cam. I'd rather you have JMK than Cam. I'd rather you have Gas than Cam. Like, that's just where he falls. Again, not bad, but just probably not the #1 priority because of how high his gate is to be able to get him. Now, the characters you maybe just don't want to farm are going to be these 7 right here. Again, we've already talked about their viability, so you should know why you don't want to farm them. Luminarum, I guess my big problem with her is that most of her viability is locked behind the Omicron, and even then, once you get it, it isn't all that good. Again, Amidala, the whole squad there is kind of unknown. And then as far as a farming perspective goes, when you get R2, Clone Wars, Chewbacca, or Barazafi, you probably should decide that not based off of Galactic Republic, but on the squads they're going to be used in. Heck, I didn't bring up Barriss until I had Rey ready to go, and I won her on that squad. Chewbacca, again, for the Wookiees, and then R2-D2 for Leia or other squads that do not involve Galactic Republic. So that is going to be the video for today. We have our farming order, we have our ranking, and we have our splits. Let me know what you think, and as always, stay awesome.